One big reason PCBs are a persistent problem is that it takes so long to clean up places like the Duwamish River, Seattle's industrial corridor. Some of Seattle's heaviest industries settled here decades ago, and today it's the region's largest hotspot for PCBs.
My name is B.J. Cummings. I represent the Duwamish River Cleanup Coalition. We're a community.
B.J. Cummings leads tours of the river, but this isn't your typical tourist outing. It's an environmental wake-up call.
The EPA did an investigation here on the Duwamish River about 10 years ago and concluded that the industrial history here had left behind such a legacy of toxic pollution that the river was declared a federal Superfund site in 2001.
Superfund is one of EPA's big sticks. It was the regulatory program created in 1980 to clean up America's worst pollution problems.
Your typical Superfund site used to be factory, pipe, Superfund site, right at the bottom of your pipe. That's not what we have here. We have what's called a mega site. We have a 5.5 mile stretch of river, end to end, that's being investigated for cleanup. This is one of the largest Superfund sites in the country. The river was listed as a Superfund site because of an accumulation, a legacy of toxic pollution that has built up in the mud at the bottom of the river.
There's a direct link between contaminated sediments in certain areas and contamination of the food web above those sediments. In fact, one might even think of the PCBs riding an elevator up from the sediments, up into plankton, up into little fish, big fish, harbor seals, killer whales, eagles, humans.
The toxic buildup in the Duwamish River bottom is the product of more than a half-century of industrial development along the river. Boeing, for example, the area's biggest corporation, had its main operations here during World War II.
We are the builders. We are the builders of the B-17. With our hands 1,000,000 strong, we milled and drilled and sheared and saw.
The success of Boeing mirrored the 20th century boom in the American economy, an era when industrial progress brought unprecedented expansion.
Ours are the hands that build the Queen, the B-17, the fortress.
But that progress also left behind an unprecedented amount of pollution, or what's called legacy pollutants.
The term legacy pollutants is when it's historical practices. What was acceptable in the 40s and 50s is we would find very unobjectionable today in the 90s and the 80s and beyond. People did not know the damage that some of these materials caused at the time. They did not know the long-term effects of them that we do today.
PCBs are a classic legacy pollutant found here at Boeing, a toxic chemical once widely used by industry, often as a high-stress lubricant in power stations and also in building materials. Frequently, it takes a lot of detective work to find hidden PCBs.
So, Steve, you found a contamination problem in the flight line out here?
Yeah, it's this material that we see between the concrete panels. It's called joint compound. Material that was installed in the late 60s contained very high levels of PCBs. And since we'd made this discovery, in the late 90s, we've now removed about 50 miles of this throughout.
50 miles?
Throughout all Boeing.
This black tar-looking stuff?
Yeah, this material throughout all of the Boeing facilities here in the Northwest.
Is that right? Why was it so hard to find?
Well, it wasn't obvious to us, and it was, normally when people talk about PCBs, you think about electrical equipment, you think about hydraulics. That's where normally PCBs are used. The fact that they were used in something that was right in front of us was difficult. It was really difficult that we overlooked it.
Making sure that Boeing doesn't overlook any of its legacy pollutants is the job of Sean Blocker, a former Marine who has been EPA's point man on the cleanup at Boeing.
What I want to talk about today is basically some additional data that we have that's on the sediments outside the current boundary of the cleanup for the Boeing Plant 2. And the significance of the Boeing facility is the number of contaminants that originate from the facility. It has over 24 things in the groundwater, 40 some odd different things that are in the soil that are above cleanup levels. So it's the biggest accumulation of contaminants in that area.
From the get-go, Boeing and EPA have clashed over how to clean up those legacy pollutants, and the arguments have led to long delays. When were you first ready to go with a cleanup plan?
We submitted a plan to EPA in 1999 when, to dredge, we call it an interim measure to take what is adjacent to Boeing and excavate that material.
Boeing says that over a decade ago, it was ready to clean up, and all that held it up was bureaucratic red tape from the EPA.
I would disagree with that. From my review of what they were going to do, I didn't think they had fully defined where all the bad stuff was. They didn't know the totality of what the contamination was, either in groundwater or soil.
But you obviously had a higher threshold for let's get to the bottom of how bad this pollution is than Boeing did.
Boeing is doing what they're asked to do. No more, no less.
So time and again, Blocker pressed Boeing to do more work and more tests. By now, Boeing has spent $80 million on testing and interim cleanups.
There's over 500 sampling locations at this facility that have been drilled over time.
And if we came here 10 years ago, how many would there have been?
50.
Okay, so hundreds more have been drilled
Since
because
then.
of this back and forth with the EPA.
That's correct.
Not only has Boeing been feuding with the EPA, but it's been locked in a fierce battle with the city of Seattle, which used to operate a steam plant next door to Boeing Field.
So,
Typical of Superfund sites, these two powerful neighbors have been wrangling over who's responsible for PCBs flowing through this ditch or flume when it rains. The flume runs from the now-defunct steam plant through Boeing's territory to the river. Boeing says it's the city's PCBs.
so was this just the city steam plant, or did Boeing and other people put storm drains into this and use it?
Pretty much it was just for the cooling water from the steam plant.
The city flat out disagrees, and it has taken Boeing to court.
PCBs are coming by connections of other people to our ditch. They come through drainage lines that come from other properties, most specifically Boeing's property.
So Boeing was attaching its drainage pipes to your flume, sending some of its dirty stuff down your flume to the river.
There have been over 20 lines attached to our ditch that came from the Boeing property.
20 lines?
Yeah.
So it's got to be an endless argument with Boeing over whose line put the dirty stuff in that flume.
It's a continuing argument.
And that argument is holding up the big cleanup on the Duwamish River. Jay Manning, who heads Washington's Department of Ecology, which helps EPA supervise the cleanup, showed me the cost of this continued delay to Puget Sound.
We're looking at 4 very large outfalls of drainage pipes that carry stormwater from more than 30 square miles of this area. You can see the one there to the right.
So this is an industrial dumping ground, in effect.
This stormwater drains a very large industrial area.
Are you all still finding PCBs and other contaminants in that water?
Unfortunately, the stormwater coming out of those drain pipes, we're still detecting PCBs.
This is going to cost millions to clean up, maybe tens of millions. And owning 90% of that liability is not a place you want to be. So these folks, who are not stupid, are busy trying to prove that it's somebody other than them that are the source.
Everybody's pointing the finger at
That's
everybody
right.
else.
And they are trying to prove, probably that not that they have no liability, because that's pretty hard to do, but proving that they have very little compared to their neighbor. That's what it's about, and it's about money.
Ultimately, the issues of cleanup, time, and money are tied to a larger question for all of us. That is, how clean do we expect our waterways to be? Here on the Duwamish, the state has posted warnings not to eat local fish and shellfish because of pollution. And so the fight now is over whether the river can be cleaned up enough to let the locals fish the river once again without risk.
What we determined was that the most sensitive population we had out there were our Native Americans that eat the fish out of the Duwamish.
And they eat a lot more fish than most of us.
They do.
And so that was the standard you wanted to set. Clean
Yes.
it up so the tribes can eat the fish safely without getting poisoned from PCBs.
Yes.
Okay. And Boeing objected to that?
Basically, they don't feel that that stretch of the river can ever be returned to where you could harvest these kind of fish and shellfish. We disagree with that.
I think people need to understand is that there are going to be certain uses of the Duwamish River that aren't going to be possible in the future. And I'll give you an example. I don't think people are going to be able to subsistence fish out of the species that are in the Duwamish. I think we have to set reasonable expectations for cleanup in industrial areas.
I mean, where do you come down on that? How clean is clean? I mean, do we need to get rivers back to where people can fish and safely eat the fish without fear to their health?
That's the goal. That is the goal. That has to be the goal. Because every one of those rivers and streams are going into Puget Sound, so it's not as if it's about that river or that stream alone. It's about the whole ecosystem.